everybody. Welcome to the PVD Horror Podcast. I'm your host, Dave, and I'm joined here with director Scott Dale. And we are here to discuss his latest film, Subservience, which is going to be on digital and demand September 13th this year. You might remember Scott from a movie called Till Death, which featured Megan Fox, as does Subservience. So, Scott, thank you so much for joining us. If you like all things horror and want to get the best horror news, interviews, and reviews,
like, subscribe, and ring that bell to follow us and satisfy all your horror needs.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So, one of the first things I was hoping we could talk about before we get into the film is I'd love to hear a little bit about your horror origins. Are you a horror fan? What got you into the genre? And maybe what are some of your favorite films?
I am a horror fan. I actually, growing up, I was so terrified as a kid of horror. My first kind of taste of horror was really that video store and going in and seeing, It or Freddy Krueger on the VHS tapes and just, your imagination going wild and being absolutely terrified. And my oldest brother was a huge horror buff. So he would at a very young age get them and be playing them, and I just could not be in the same room, and so I would just like see part of a scene here and there, and I think ultimately it was worse because my imagination was just kind of making it much more terrifying and haunting me and giving me nightmares. But it wasn't actually until I went to film school that I felt safe enough to actually watch horror movies. I was just terrified of them. So it was kind of an exciting time in my 20s to really start with horror and kind of work my way back historically. And I'm a big fan of The Exorcist. I think that kind of slow burn, like it just hasn't been replicated in a way that has kind of stuck with me all the way up to, one that really freaked me out was Skinamarink. I feel like in the last 10 years, I haven't really seen a horror that's unnerved me as much as that film.
Very cool. I love that you just referenced that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, Subservience kind of dabbles with horror, sci-fi, thriller, amongst kind of all those genres. What's made you want to dig into those genres and make films within that realm?
I think it's just my love for certain films within those genres. I think what filmmaker doesn't want to play with sci-fi, because you get like ultimate kind of creative fun control. You can go wild. And it was also like, a challenge to restrain myself and try and make this sci-fi film feel as grounded as possible. But, I think I've always loved genre films. It's part of the reason why I, as an Australian filmmaker, wanted to make films with Hollywood. It was, I think, my love for that genre and wanting to add my own thoughts to it. And really, I love actually kind of connecting genres, in a certain way. Like Subservience kind of has this like erotic thriller, but also this sci-fi horror. So seeing all this kind of blend together, I just love playing with that mixture of genres, and to me that's where you start to make things feel a bit more unique and play around with things that haven't been done.
That actually just really hit the nail on the head when you said that, because as I was watching this, I was kind of struck by how erotic this film is. It's a sexy film in parts. Like there is definitely some parts that it's like, oh wow, it's going in this direction. But I think you do such a great job. You mentioned it already, keeping it grounded, and it doesn't go full-fledged into like suddenly we're watching a softcore, Showtime midnight show or whatever. It like goes in those directions, but you do a great job of keeping, like you said, keeping the film grounded, keeping it on its course, so we suddenly don't lose like what the focus is. I was really impressed with that, so I'm so glad to hear you kind of say that was intentional.
Thank you. Yeah. And I got to give credit to the writers, Will and April. I think they did a great job at finding that balance pretty early on in the script. And so for me, it was kind of tonally kind of sticking with that and making sure, we tweaked a few things and we played, I wanted to really lean into the idea of that, that technology. It was like, well, how do we make an intimate scene feel, refreshing in a certain way. And so I think leaning into the sci-fi, the voice,
Yeah.
and ultimately, and it wasn't until only a few weeks out from shooting that we kind of decided to do a mixture of actresses in terms of those scenes. So it was, yeah, that was a kind of little fun extra bit we kind of threw in there at the last second that I really love and how it played out.
Yeah, absolutely. I read a quote that you have, and I thought it was really cool. I wanted to share it so that maybe you could elaborate on it a little bit. The quote was, "I believe that the horror genre is one of the only genres left where you can still be original. You don't have to do something that is based on IP. You can try something a bit different." So I like that because it actually shows a little bit of respect to the genre, which I think it often lacks. Like a lot of times it's overlooked, and people don't kind of see the benefit of working in horror. But could you kind of speak on that a little bit? Like, I think that's such
Yeah,
a awesome idea.
I think there's kind of ultimately a few reasons why I believe that. One is that it's just the fear of the unknown. Like, there's nothing more terrifying than when you start to watch like Skinamarink. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's so different and unique in its own way, and that's what made it so terrifying to me. Is because I couldn't, you know, unlike a Marvel movie, you can kind of be like, all right, I know where we're leading, I know where the third act is going to be, and I know what these two are going to fight, and that's fine, and we love that and we enjoy that.
Yeah.
But I think horror films that terrify me is when I'm like, well, where are we going to be in that third act?
Yes.
What's going to happen when we get there? I think another thing as well is just budgetarily, horror movies tend to be lower budget, and I think that allows more creative freedom and bigger risks. And I think that's a huge issue for me personally with a lot of cinema is that the bigger the budget, the more of the audience we need to appease, and the more terrified people get to try more unique things. So
Yeah.
I think that kind of that smaller budget creates something really exciting, and also the restrictions of a smaller budget. If you had something else planned, and I remember we had a big kind of action sequence planned at some point in Subservience, and we're shooting it, and it's kind of like, well, I know you had 15 shots planned, but you've only got 2 shots left. How are we
Right.
going to do this?
Yeah.
And in the end, we kind of focused on a small object in the foreground while we had this kind of fight happening. And once you add the sound to it and everything, it became much more gruesome and brutal than I had ever expected. And so I think those restrictions spark creativity in ways you never expected. And yeah, I just think that the horror genre deserves a lot more credit than it gets.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Scott, do me a favor. Give our listeners a brief synopsis of what Subservience is about.
Subservience is about a father who is, struggling to stay afloat while his wife is in hospital waiting on a heart transplant, and he has, some kids and work life and everything. And so he ends up getting this android sim to come to the house and help him, look after the kids or clean up while he's, you know, uh, able to work and go check on, and look after the kids and the wife. And while this is happening, the world around him is going through this AI transition where the workforce and even the hospital we think people are slowly being replaced by these sims. And this one particular sim that they have played by Megan Fox is just slowly starting to unravel and trying to fracture the family and ultimately take the position of the mother. And just to kind of go off on a tangent from there, that to me is where I actually fell in love with the script, was seeing Maggie and Alice kind of butt heads.
Yeah.
And really, the emotion that kind of comes from that, and that idea of your position within a family and having that taken away from you and your own family. Sure. And having a 7-week-old newborn currently, you see that vital connection between a mother and their child. And so that idea of early on, losing that connection, it was just interesting to explore.
There's a lot of interesting themes. serious themes that are explored here. Like you said, being a parent to a newborn and kind of like that feeling of something interfering with that, but also that idea of Maggie being sick and how that grief can be scary for the wife and how that might make her at sometimes kind of agree to things maybe she wouldn't in her, if she was completely well, but also for the husband who's kind of like struggling dealing with that and trying to keep the family together. So there's a lot of like different interesting family themes in this film.
Yeah, and I think family was like a big, just in general, that the idea of family was a big theme that we wanted to explore, because it kind of is this polar opposite of AI and technology, is the family unit and the emotional connection and the
Yeah.
love we have. So and ultimately it is about, either they're going to become fractured and fail against this AI, or they're going to have to unite to defeat it. And so I really kind of wanted to lean in further into that. And it's one of the things that I love about that film is that we have Maggie, this character, kind of sneak in slowly, and slowly become our a hero of a film as well, which is
Right.
exciting.
And this is your second film with Megan Fox,
Mm-hmm.
because she also starred in Till Death. What is it about working with her that made you want to have her in this role for this project?
I thought the big thing for me was that this felt like a completely different performance to Till Death. So that excited me. I didn't want to do the same thing twice with the same actress. So that was kind of vital. I think when we were developing it, this idea of it being this kind of sci-fi version of Jennifer's body in terms of her character arc and kind of going down this darker,
Sure.
badass path, I really started to excite me, that thought. And ultimately, I think as well, having that trust from the first film, and to approach these intimate scenes, like you kind of need a lot of trust there, and you need that environment for people to feel safe and comfortable. So having that trust already went a long way to kind of, making those scenes work, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Another theme that was in here that I caught. So there's this work friend who gets canned from this job, and there's I don't want to like give too much information about that, but there's a little bit of like the big conflict that happens between our main character and that work friend. And he says something that really sparked kind of what some of this is about. There's this fear of, there's like the old school view, which fears what the new technology is going to bring, right? So I think that's like a big theme. And, I think that comes up a lot today when we talk about AI. There's like a fear based around it. And, everybody's fear seems to be a little bit different. I was wondering what aspect of, the advancement of AI and technology do you find to be the most scary?
I think the scariest thing is seeing the threat to creativity from it. I think creativity is a spark of the human soul.
Yeah.
And I'm worried that if we become too much reliant on AI for creativity, we are losing something. The idea of, painting a picture or doing, a drawing, despite how much I suck at painting and drawing, does fulfill me in certain ways. And I think I'm nervous to see what starts to happen to society as we lose creativity, because I think picking up a guitar and starting to play tunes and everything is exciting, and then trying to write lyrics or chords, writing that to ChatGPT, saying, hey, write me a song that speaks about love and all this kind of stuff. I don't know what happens to a generation that loses creativity, and I'm pretty fearful of that.
Yeah. It's part of the process, right? That
Mhm.
learning, honing your skills, failure, it's all part of the process. And this AI doesn't have to go through any of that process.
Exactly. And I think it is something that you kind of tap into, when you're writing a screenplay and you're getting like really deep with these characters. And there's a certain point that I think sometimes the characters start to move the narrative in a direction that you weren't actually expecting, or the way you kind of plotted it out. And I think that that's something you start to tap into, and it's hard to kind of find that pool of creativity. And yeah, it's just the more reluctant we become. It's also just we are becoming as a society more easily distracted, and we need a 10-second clip coming up, and TikTok is bang,
Yeah.
bang, bang, video. So we're not really kind of sitting with ourselves. And I still get excited when I meet someone that reads a book, and it's like, oh wow, that's incredible. Like let your imagination do the work.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So yeah, I think that's scary. There are definitely, like, especially in the medical world, where I think AI could, it's doing research in a faster rate, and it's creating things that are helping humans, either live longer or survive illnesses that we haven't been able to figure out. Like, that to me is exciting. But yeah, creativity, I think, and I know I'm saying this as a filmmaker, as a creative, but it's more on just other levels that we creativity needs to be there at some point. There are certain things where I see people kind of allowing technology for them to be creative as well, which is great. But I just think once you start to lean too heavily on it, yeah, it's a muscle. If you don't keep using it, it becomes weaker and weaker, and then you can't. Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think that, yeah, there's so many directions to go in that conversation, but I fully support what you're saying there. And I think, like, films like this really do start, like, we're seeing more and more technology based thrillers and sci-fi films, because, like, I do think there's a general fear of what this could present. And often our films are a reflection of, like, the fears that are happening in society or events that are happening. So I suspect that we'll probably see a lot of, like, technology based thrillers and horror as we go along. I had a question for you. Hypothetically speaking, let's say you had to get an AI nanny for your family. Are you getting a sexy one, or are you getting that old school butler?
I don't think my wife would let me. It's going to be an old school butler. Yeah.
Okay. The choice of the nanny was, like, I know the daughter picks the nanny in the beginning, and he's like, gives that look, but it's like, buddy, you should have known better. You should have known better.
It's interesting, when we were directing the scene, the first time Alice comes to the hospital and Maggie sees her, and it was something I never thought about, but Madeline Zimmer, who plays the wife, was kind of like, she's like, I can't help but, like, react in some way of, like, this is what you bought. I sent you out to get a nanny. This is the one you come home with, of course. And so she has this look where she's just eyeing her up and down that I just never thought about. And it's like, oh yeah, this is so true. This is exactly how you would, a wife or a husband would react if they bring back sexiest. But yeah.
And his reaction was the best too, because he did what every guy would do, where you absolutely avoid any to look in the direction of the woman that's very attractive standing in the corner. He was like turned his back completely. He did what every single guy would do. And I thought it felt like a really genuine scene, like their reactions to everything. I was like, that is spot on. Because I was looking to see if he was going to, like, get all defensive, but he pretended like he had no idea she was standing there. So,
yeah, exactly.
It was great. Scott, I know you got to wrap up. You got 1,000 more interviews that you probably have to do regarding this film, but I just was curious, are you able to share if there's anything coming out for you? And also, where can people, track your work, and where can they find you? Are you on social media or anything?
Yeah, social media. I'm on Instagram, down as SK Dale. In terms of, we're developing a few other projects. There's a really exciting true story that I love, and I kind of worked with the producer to get the life rights of this person, John McAvoy, who he was part of this infamous bank robbing family, and he ends up serving 2 life sentences in prison at the age of 21. And while he's there, he starts to focus on sports, and finds that he can do incredible speeds on a rowing machine, and ends up breaking several world records while he's incarcerated, being trained by one of the guards, and comes out the other side as this Nike sponsored triathlete who now travels the world talking prison reform. So it's completely different
Yeah.
direction
Super
to
interesting though. Yeah.
yeah, but I think I'm inspired by people who can truly change themselves. I think we are kind of in a society now that doesn't believe that people can change.
Sure.
And it feels like a really important story to tell, but that's just one of many that I'm trying to. There's a few horrors, there's a few
Cool.
fun action films as well in there.
Awesome. Scott, please come back whenever you get a chance to talk horror with us. We would love that. But I'm also super intrigued by that story as well. So hopefully you get to check that out soon. For everyone listening and watching, please make sure you check out Subservience on digital and on demand September 13th. It's a super fun sci-fi thriller. I think you will be pleasantly surprised at some of the performances and just how much you are going to enjoy this film. So thank you again, Scott. Really appreciate your time, and everybody.
Thank you so much, mate. And
Have
happy
a
to
great
jump
night,
on
everybody.
anytime again. Yeah, loved it.
Awesome. We would love
Thank you.
that. So thank you, everyone, and have a good night.